Hey everyone. You know, I haven't talked about this much lately due to the fact that I've been talking a lot about other things, and you can see that here on this channel. But mainly what I haven't talked about in a while is because I've been noticing a lot of people have been hopping on to this forum a lot lately. And that's the whole Shaggy Daphne situation. And I'm not going to go back on what I said, because I still stand by the fact that I do support that pairing, if you will. But I also understand that we're sort of in a new era, sort of a new generation to where it's like you can hint at the possibility of them being probably an item, but the more default recognizable item, especially in this day and age, would be Fred and Daphne. And I know there's a lot of fans that support Fred and Daphne, but I know, believe it or not, whether people want to admit it or not, there's just a little bit more, or there's just a little bit larger fan base that supports Shaggy and Daphne. But I can understand why you got that little bit larger fan base that supports Shaggy and Daphne more so than supporting the whole Fred Daphne thing that a lot of people say we're getting shoved down our throats, if you will. And it's due to the fact that I was born in '79, and I know there were some that were probably born, fans, supporters, if you will, that were born around that time as I was, born around maybe a year or so after or something like that. More so, I would say probably more along the lines of like the mid to late 70s and mid to late 70s, early 80s and something like that, mid 80s and whatever. And they look at shows like, they look at shows, they look basically at shows like, let's say Scooby-Doo, the all-new Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo show, later on the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries, as being the first introduction to Scooby-Doo. I know for a fact that it was my first introduction. I know for a fact it was my first introduction to the franchise because I was like 5 years old or 4 years old when the all new Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo show came around, and then about 5 years old when the new Mysteries came, and then 6 when they did 13 Ghosts. So pretty much I can understand why there's a lot of fans of my generation, and maybe a little later on, that support Shaggy and Daphne more than anything. But I think what's going on, I think the reason we kind of have, this sort of like, Shaggy Daphne versus Fred Daphne situation going on at times, especially more so when you look at, the recent decades and stuff, from basically about 98 to recently, you kind of see, as a lot of people say, the WB favoring Fred and Daphne more than anything, especially, let's say, like with Stage Fright, which is the more recent Scooby-Doo film, direct-to-video film. They're favoring them more there, even though, according to some people, it just ends like, Fred really, it's like, just ends with an ending to where it's like, all of it was for nothing kind of deal. But it's basically one of those situations to where it's basically one of those situations to where it's basically one of those situations to where it's like they, it's just one of those situations to where it's basically about time about errors you're in and time frame you're in. You see, you take a look at Mystery Inc., and of course that kind of shoved the situation down our throats and all that, as some people would say, but it's basically about time and place. And basically the reason you're getting the whole Fred Daphne situation a little bit more than you are Shaggy Daphne is mainly due to the fact that it's a new generation. And just like when Scooby started initially, today being the anniversary of the franchise, I think being the 1968, 69 it started, but 69 I believe, 68, 69, well, initially about 44 or 45 years ago, when the franchise started, back then, about 44 or 45 years ago, to this day, a lot of people insinuated when the show first began that you had Fred and Daphne as an item, and then of course it would showcase to Shaggy and Velma probably being an item. But it really wasn't, that obvious as much as it should be. I mean, true, a lot of people would say, a lot of people have mentioned that there are certain, hints here and there that you got to look at, certain images, if you will, like quick scenes and episodes and stuff. And, I'm guessing, just my opinion, but I'm guessing that because that lasted about from about, essentially, some people have pointed out that it lasted mostly to about 75, because when they started doing the new Scooby-Doo, they did the Scooby-Doo show, which we were introduced to Scooby-Dee and Scooby-Dummin'. It kind of showcased there that she was more, that maybe Fred and Daphne weren't an item anymore, and she might show some interest in Shaggy and some other guys and stuff like that. But to me, I think it's because it lasted for a lot longer than what we had from 83 to basically about 86, 87, that Warner Brothers, in my opinion, they look at that and they say, well, this lasted a lot longer than the other one. I mean, when you think about it, some people would say, well, it lasted a little after that. It lasted up to about 1978, 1979, basically a 10-year run. And, that's why you have, in my opinion, why you probably have that favoritism towards that pairing more than anything, because they had a longer run as a group altogether, especially paired off, as individual pairings, if you will, than the Shaggy Daphne run from about 83 to 86, 87. So it's an understanding why, again, you have that kind of versus kind of deal, because I think Warner Brothers, they're basically trying to work on what lasted longer, and obviously, I guess in their eyes, was more successful. Now, it's not to say that they don't recognize what took place in the past, because obviously, you could see hints of that in some of the films, and if not in Mystery Inc. In Mystery Inc., one of the things Shaggy Daphne fans were actually happy about, even though it was due to a certain situation in that episode, is you had Shaggy and Daphne kiss, and you had them cuddle together, even though it's because of some kind of aroma, some kind of wood or something like that would cause them to be delusional or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, you had that, and even though it was because of that situation, there was still some Shaggy Daphne fans that were happy about that. And then, of course, you have certain movies like Legend of the Fatasaur, vampire or something like that. And there are certain scenes there to where fans are like, hey, Daphne, they're showing Shaggy and Daphne together, if you will. And it's like, maybe and some people are like, maybe they're getting the hint, maybe they're getting the idea, people want to see that. But then again, what disappoints them is that later on in another direct-to-video movie, it gets pulled back. Especially in Mystery Inc., it gets pulled back. But here's my understanding about it. Here's the way I look at it. I think those at Warner Brothers that work on the series, they understand. I know some people would find it hard to believe, but I think they understand that fans want to see Shaggy Daphne. But it's basically due to the fact that we're in a time, in an era, if you will, to where we're in a time and an era, if you will, to where, thanks to, let's say, Disney, most of all, let's say thanks to Disney, where it's established that the good-looking guy, protagonist, if you will, ends up with the attractive-looking female protagonist. In other words, Fred, in other words, for the Scooby-Doo franchise right now, with, under Warner Brothers, that basically equals out to Fred Daphne, whether we like it or not. And so due to the fact that we're in a time and an era, if you will, to where, I guess you could say, like, thanks to Disney of all people, it's basically established that it's the good-looking protagonist getting together with the good-looking female protagonist. If you want a good example of this, I know it's crazy as it sounds, take a look at Hunchback of Notre Dame. Everybody thought, okay, maybe they'll do something, they'll put Esmeralda with Quasimodo. Now, they did give Quasimodo a love interest in the direct-to-video sequel, which was good. But the thought was, hey, maybe they'll give Quasimodo the love interest. Maybe they'll go into left field and say Quasimodo and Esmeralda together. But they didn't. And even though he was like I guess you could say at first, as some people put it, a tritagonist, in other words, between pro and anti, if you will, or pro and ant, if you will, basically a tritagonist, a tri-protagonist, let's put it that way. They decided to go with Phoebus because he was good looking. So they went with Phoebus being with Esmeralda instead of going in that left direction and saying, hey, let's give Quasimodo and put Esmeralda and Quasimodo together. But again, they did make up for that later on in the sequel. But my point is, that's basically why Warner Brothers does what they do. When they do the Scooby-Doo stuff, and they, kind of try to focus at times, like let's say recently with Stage Fright, on Fred Daphne, because it follows that formula of good-looking gets together with good-looking. I mean, they even tried to compensate Shaggy in Mystery Inc. I'll give them that. They tried to compensate Shaggy by saying, hey, look, you've got Velma, and they're trying to, and the reason they did that is they were playing off of what obviously was in the original, if you will, obviously what was in the original, and they wanted to make it a reality. And that's what they did. They played off it for a while. But again, I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but the point I'm trying to get across is because of the reason we have this little battle, if you will, not very noticeable at times, but this battle between, who's better, who's better suited to be with Daphne, Fred, like who's the better pairing, Fred Daphne or Shaggy Daphne. It's all because of the time and era we're in. The time or era we're in is basically established to where the good-looking gets together with the good-looking. Even in Warner Brothers, even in some of the films, the feature films at times, the good-looking protagonist, or even tri-protagonist, whatever you want to call them, gets together with the good-looking protagonist. Take a look at Iron Giant, if you will, for a good example on that. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, there have been other examples where you think to where the so-called good-looking never got anything. And that's true. That is true. You take a look at Treasure Planet, for example. You have, I can't think of the character's name, but you have this kind of like associate, this sort of like member of the basically sort of a close family friend of Jim Hawkins and his mom, and he's a cat guy. He's a cat guy, if you will. And he gets attracted to this cat girl, except she doesn't show anything towards him until later on. And that's kind of like what people would say would be sort of like and if you want an example of what fans want with Shaggy and Daphne, there you go. Check out Disney's Treasure Planet, and that pairing, and that couple of that pairing happening, if you will. It's like there's Shaggy. It's like here's this doctor guy that could represent Shaggy, and here's this captain that represents Daphne. Boom, there you go. You wouldn't think it's going to happen. Boom, it happens. Heck, even look at Wreck-It Ralph, even though it's obvious at some times. You take a look at Fix-It Felix, he's kind of like a Shaggy. You take a look at Sergeant Calhoun, she's sort of like a tough-nosed Daphne. You wouldn't think, oh, well, they'll get together. Guess what? They do. You would think, oh, it's obvious they'll get together, but will they? Because sometimes Disney kind of throws you off a little bit in the movie, but they end up together. The point is there are examples of someone in this kind of like the Shaggy state, if you will, the Shaggy position, that does end up getting together with someone in the Daphne position. But you see, it's going to take, but you see right now, Warner Brothers, in my opinion, refuses to look at that. They refuse to look at any other examples out there of what works, of what's successful. And I think, honestly, I still believe, in my heart, folks, I still honestly believe that Warner Brothers is eventually going to do Shaggy and Daphne together down the line. I truly believe that. You could say, oh, they're not going to do it. Guess what? We have gone through feature film, direct-to-film, 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 direct-to-television film, direct-to-television film, theatrical, and all that, and not one. And you know what? They have hinted at it many times in the direct-to-video films as well. Let's not forget that. Phantosaur, Camp Scare, maybe someone put up a picture saying, could this look like they're holding hands or something like that? Phantosaur, you name it, the Situation Mystery Inc. Heck, someone even complimented at the end of Legend of the Lake Monster, or Curse of the Lake Monster, which was the sequel to the first direct-to-television movie, live action that is. At the end of the Curse of the Lake Monster, some people say that Daphne, the Daphne character, was showing some interest in the Shaggy character. So Warner Brothers, I believe, knows and acknowledges it, but right now they're focusing more on what sells, in their opinion, and what sells, in their opinion, is Fred Daphne, because of that formula of good-looking guy protagonist gets together with good-looking female protagonist. End of story. But I feel and believe that they have done as much as they can with that. And I think anybody else watching this knows what I'm saying, that they have done as much as they can with that. And sooner or later, someone's going to come out and say, hey, look, there's a fan base out there that wants to see a possible Shaggy-Daphne pairing. Could we make it happen? And I'm guaranteeing you, I guarantee you, that's all that needs to be mentioned. And I bet you it, and I just believe, I just feel in my gut, feel in my heart and gut. What is that? No, it's something. I had to get something out of my dog's mouth. But anyway, sorry about that. I had to get something out of my dog's mouth. She wasn't chewing it right. Oh, it was kind of bothering her. She was going like, no. But anyway, the point is, getting back to what I was saying. Point is, I truly believe, I just feel in my gut and in my heart, and my mind, someone at Warner Brothers that works on these movies and on the Scooby-Doo franchise is going to come out, is going to speak out and say, hey, look, we've tried everything we can with Shaggy, with Fred, Daphne. You know, maybe we should attempt doing Shaggy Daphne because that's, believe it or not, that's what some fans want to see happen. Maybe we can make it happen. And I guarantee you it will. I mean, heck, this talk of the Scooby-Doo franchise heading back to the big screen in animated form. That could be the possibility there. But will it? You see, I believe sooner or later they're going to do it. Right now they're just stuck in a formula that they feel succeeds. But sooner or later they're going to start seeing maybe sales go down. Maybe they're going to start hewing what people want. Maybe they're going to start seeing sales go down and they're going to be like, you know what? Maybe we need to fix this. And like I said, that's probably when somebody's going to stand up and say, hey, look, we've tried the whole Fred Daphne thing for, 15 years? Maybe it's time for us to try something different. And I guarantee you, maybe we'll get that real soon. You can't come out and say it'll never happen, because there's an old saying in the media, in the show business, if you will, in show business and in sports entertainment and entertainment in general, and that is never say never. That's right, never say never. Let me give you an example. 11 and a half years ago, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall returned to the WWE when it was WWF still. No one thought it was going to happen, but it did. And they returned at the tail end, if you will. They returned basically at the tail end of the Attitude Era. So they were part of the Attitude Era. And no one ever thought they were going to be part of that. But even though they was at the tail end of it, they were part of it. And that basically supported the saying of never say never. That's why I believe you can never say never about the possibility of Shaggy Daphne finally being showcased in some form down the line, because I believe it will be. I believe down the line, 2014, 2015, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Because I guarantee, because I believe somebody that works on these Scooby-Doo stuff is going to stand up and say, hey, look, we've done this for 15 years. We've done the same formula. We've tried to basically we've tried to basically get, we basically tried to give people the impression that Daphne and Fred are a pairing or a couple, and yet some people won't accept it. Maybe we should try this direction. And I guarantee you, or something like that, I guarantee you somebody's going to bring it up, over that work on the Scooby-Doo franchise. They're going to be like, we've tried this, maybe we need to go in this direction and see how it gets responded. And who knows? Again, though, the only reason they're doing this is because it's a different era in time right now, and it's a new generation. But sooner or later, this generation is going to get tired of it. We all know that. So the question is when and where. I think it's going to be sooner than we think. We just got to be patient. Because like I said, I believe someone's that works on the movies and all that helps work on the franchise at the WB. They're going to stand up and say, look, we've tried the Daphne Fred thing for 15 years in all these movies. Not many fans are accepting it as much as we try to get them to grasp the idea. Maybe we should try Shaggy Daphne and see what happens. And you know what? It just might happen. And because of something like that, it just may occur. I believe it will. It's not a may. You know what? In fact, it's not a may to me. It will happen. I mean, why? And here's the thing. It's like I said. Being born in 1979, amongst the generation of people that were born in the mid to late 70s, if not early 80s, that grew up on it, that grew up with Scooby at that time period, and their first introduction to Scooby is the all-new Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo show / New Scooby-Doo Mysteries and 13 Ghosts. Do you ever wonder why someone like me would use Windows DVD Maker. And on all three of these, a majority of them start out, if not a completely filled, if you will, with the all-new Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo show / new Scooby-Doo mysteries. Has that ever occurred to you? I mean, yeah, I have episodes of Scooby-Doo show with Scooby-Doo in there. Yeah, I have several of the crossover episodes of new Scooby-Doo movies. But a majority of what I have on here, also, mainly, is the new Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo, all-new Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo show / new Scooby-Doo mysteries. Heck, I have the complete series of 13 Goes. So what part of the franchise do you think I grew up on and enjoyed watching the most and became a fan of the most? Exactly. So I can understand there's a lot of fans about my generation, maybe a little younger, or maybe a few years older or whatever. You know, there's a lot of fans and around my generation, like I say, maybe born maybe a few years younger, a few years older, that can understand what I'm talking about, but can also understand why we're in the situation we're in. So, but anyway, that is why we have sort of that Shaggy Daphne versus Fred Daphne thing going on right now. Because of the time and era we're in, and due to the fact that a lot of us, including myself, our first introduction to Scooby was with the Shaggy Daphne run from '83 to '86. So, that's all I'm going to say on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. Take your time watching this video. But hopefully, I help clear the air or kind of give a better understanding as to why we have what we have right now. God bless. Take care.